Hi, my name's John Dick. In this development blog, we're going to talk about the ancient art of archery, the skill of using bow and arrows invented by cowards who didn't have the balls to face their enemies in direct combat. First, let's cover the bows that you may encounter in the game. The first one is the improvised bow or the longbow, which is fully flat when unstrung. It's also the largest, and due to its profile, it's less prone to string torque. This handsome snack of a man is holding a recurve. When unstrung, it curves away from the archer. It's noisier than the longbow because the string and limbs are in direct contact. However, the curved limbs make it smaller and more powerful than a longbow of the same size. The last one is a modern compound bow. It's a modern version of the traditional bow. Compounds use a pulley system that takes the strain off the bow and provides slack for the archer, making it easier to shoot with accuracy. The part of the bow that you hold onto is called the riser. In this case, both recurve and compound bows have the center shot risers that allow the arrow to be fully aligned with the string. True center shot allows the center of the arrow to be launched through the center line of the bow. The arrow on the improvised bow is offset to the side, measuring from the center line of the bow. This means that when the arrow leaves the bow, it has to go around the riser, which brings us to something that's called the archer's paradox. A paradox is a phenomenon involving two or more things with contradictory nature. For example, like how our buddy Errol here managed to squeeze into his lovely tights. When you look at it from above, you can see that the target, the bow, and the string are lined up perfectly while the arrow is pointing in a slightly different direction. Nevertheless, after the release, the arrow eventually hits the target. So how is that possible? The secret lies in the flexibility of the arrow. After release, the arrow gets pushed by the string towards the bow and it starts to bend. When bending, the arrow builds up strain energy until it eventually snaps into the opposite direction and leaves the bow. This means that the arrow is actually bending around the bow during its travel toward the target. So the archer's paradox is the phenomenon where you have a bow between the arrow and the target, but the arrow still manages to get around the bow and hit the target precisely. If you examine the arrow's flight, you'll see that it literally flexes in both directions and spins during the whole flight path towards the target. How much the arrow will flex in the air is determined by its spine. The spine is a factor that determines the stiffness of the arrow. By looking at everything from above, you can notice two distinct curves. When these two curves cross, they create nodes, node A and node B. By connecting these two nodes, you'll get the direction that the arrow flies. And that's most unfortunate for the adorable little Bugsy here, who didn't listen to his mom and regularly skipped class to steal Easter eggs, thinking that he'd be safe simply because the arrow isn't pointed at him directly. Now, let's look at the compound bow. Their levering system makes them more energy efficient than other bows, but a good deal of strength is needed to initially draw the bow. They're smaller than traditional bows, so they can be stored in large backpacks, but they're also very sensitive to impact. The compounds are the most powerful bows in the game. The good thing about compounds is that they can be upgraded with accessories, like single pin or multi-pin sights, or string silencers, and even different types of stabilizers. All these accessories will improve the performance of the bow in some way. Here you can see the difference between compounds with and without stabilizers. You can easily see how the bow on the right is much more stable and allows the player to make a more precise shot. One of the main benefits of a compound bow is the let-off. Compared to the traditional bow, as you pull the compound bow, the draw weight drops. So an archer is holding considerably less weight at full draw than the peak draw weight. Holding just 30% of a bow's peak draw weight at full draw while waiting for that shot makes the task a lot easier. The ability to draw the bow depends on your character's strength and archery skill level. If the poundage of the bow is too big, you won't be able to draw the compound bow, but you'll still be able to use the traditional bow partially. Depending on the strength and skill level, it can be drawn up to 75% of the full draw. This can be enough to save your life. However, if you find a bow that you just can't use because you're too weak or your skill is too low, there is a solution for that also. You just have to find a toolbox and adjust the cams a bit to get the ideal draw weight for your character. This is something that applies only to compound bows. Traditional bows have fixed poundage that cannot be changed. If you craft an improvised bow, it will be automatically adjusted for the ratio of your skill and your strength level. Now, let's cover the types of arrows that you can encounter in the game. The simplest ones are wooden shafts without fletching. They can be easily crafted from branches, and they are best used with low poundage bows. Regarding their spine, these arrows are weak, so if they're used with high poundage bows, they'll fly slightly to the right. The next are wooden arrows with fletching. They're the same as the previous arrows, except the feathers give them more stability in flight. Wooden arrows will most likely break if they hit harder surfaces. Feathers can be found near hen houses, near trees, and supposedly they can also be found on birds. Metal or aluminum arrows are stiffer than the wooden arrows, and they're more durable. They're best used with the mid-poundage range bows. A drawback of metal arrows is they can be bent, and that'll influence their trajectory. The last ones are carbon arrows. They're the most durable and the stiffest ones. It's recommendable to use them with high poundage bows, like compounds, but you can also use them with traditional bows. Because of their stiffness, if they're shot from a weak bow, they'll fly a bit to the left. The arrow's spine is absolutely critical to how well your bow will perform. If the arrow is not tuned well, then you won't be able to group as well as you are shooting. Depending on the stiffness, arrows will fly to the left or the right from the aiming point. The arrow's spine is influenced by peak draw weight, the length of the arrow, and the tip weight. The game simulates the spine of the arrow, but we have temporarily disabled it until we add arrow tuning support. Once we do that, you'll be able to tune arrows and perform trick shots, like shooting behind corners. However, it's good to know that any trajectory except a straight one causes a massive energy loss and results in poor penetration of the arrow. SCUM has the most realistic ballistics available, and the same rules apply to arrows too. Well-tuned shaft will always penetrate the target perpendicularly, no matter if it has fletching or not. Too stiff or too weak shafts without fletching will hit the target with a slight angle. This angle can lower the penetration of the arrow. The whole purpose of the fletching is to stabilize and correct the flight of the arrow. Without the fletching, there's nothing that can correct the arrow's flight path. On the other hand, the heavy wind has less influence on bare shafts than arrows with fletching. There are 3 different types of quivers in the game. The first 2 can be crafted, and the last can be found. The first one is an improvised quiver. It's made out of rags and branches, and it can hold up to 12 arrows. The second one is an animal skin quiver, and it has 2 slots that can hold 12 arrows each, meaning 24 arrows total. The final one is the military quiver, and it has 3 slots that can hold 12 arrows each, meaning 36 arrows total. The archery skill is the most important thing if you're planning to use bows in the game. These 2 players have the same attributes, but they have different skill levels. The aiming indicator lasts much longer for the higher skilled character, and when it disappears, you'll have to aim by yourself and compensate with your skill as a player. The more skilled archer can also hold the bow in full draw for a much longer time. The strength is the second most important factor when using the bow. Here you can see equally skilled archers that have different strength levels. The stronger archer can hold the bow in a full draw for a longer time. Dexterity influences the speed of reloading and partially affects the draw speed too. Here you can see the difference in speed between a slow and fast character that share the same skill level and strength attribute. Finally, here you can see the difference between minimum and maximum of what you can achieve in the game. Notice the character on the left is so weak he can't even pull the 25-pound bow all the way, so not only is he slow, he's also quite inefficient. In the end, we can make a quick comparison between guns and bows. Let's see how these 2 guys with different weapons perform. It's obvious that firearms are far superior when compared to bows. Although the penetration of low-caliber bullets is similar to the high-poundage bow, it's clear that the rate of fire, range, ease of use, and overall practicality makes guns better. However, bows make less noise, and once all the shots are fired, the archer can easily retrieve his arrows back. Eventually, when we add different types of tips to arrows like explosives, acid, or poisonous tips, maybe then bows might prevail in a gunfight. Who knows? As usual, everything depends on the situation, so pick your fights carefully. We hope that you've enjoyed the video, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Discord, and the SCUM Steam page. John Dick, signing out, reminding you to stay hard and play hard, scumbags. Life is too short to waste time with anything less than the best. SCUM.
No actual animals were harmed during the filming of this video. Any apparent portrayal of injury was the result of a consensual social contract. Some rabbits are known to actually enjoy pain.